This week in the Pentagon, the Defense Department continues ongoing discussions about sending more troops to Afghanistan.
There are ongoing discussions about what else can be done to meet the needs of the commanders in the field.
Plus, a verdict in the trial against a Guantanamo Bay detainee charged with supporting terrorism.
Mr. Hamdan did receive a full and fair trial. He was convicted of material support to terrorism.
And
the only thing I have left is the love letters.
A love story more than 41 years in the making.
You can't explain the feeling that came out of my soul.
Welcome to This Week in the Pentagon. I'm Sergeant Brian Buckwalter. When it comes to safeguarding the health of service members and their families, one of the best ways to protect oneself from disease and illness is through immunizations. This month, the military kicks off National Immunization Awareness Month. Here's a little history of vaccines. The origin of vaccines can be traced all the way back to 1796, when English physician Edward Jenner discovered that by injecting people with cowpox, he could prevent them from getting the much more deadly smallpox. He may have been a little radical, perhaps. Jenner tested his theory by inoculating people with smallpox, but the test worked, and the vaccine was born. Another immunization pioneer is Louis Pasteur. You know, the guy who invented the pasteurization process for milk. Well, he came up with vaccines for cholera, anthrax, and rabies. His work was revolutionary because he used artificially generated weakened forms of the diseases, not anything found naturally. Today, because of vaccines, many diseases have been virtually eliminated, especially in the United States, and they're pretty much required for school-aged children. The DoD is getting the word out about the importance of vaccines with Immunization Awareness Month through August. We'll have more later in the show on exactly what immunization programs are in place for service members and their families, and what DoD is doing to better educate people about the importance of getting vaccinated. But first, the Senate confirms 2 Air Force generals for top military positions and other news this week in the Pentagon.
August 1st, General Norton Schwartz was confirmed to be the 19th Air Force Chief of Staff. Currently, he serves as Commander of United States Transportation Command. General Schwartz succeeds General T. Michael Mosley as the Air Force's top officer. On the same day, the Senate also confirmed General Duncan McNabb as the new TRANSCOM Commander. Pentagon officials announced the extension of deployments by 1 month for about 1,200 Marines working to train Afghan security forces. The Marines from 2nd Battalion, 7th Regiment will stay in Afghanistan through late November. Pentagon Press Secretary Jeff Morrell says ongoing discussions continue among military officials to determine if additional troops will be sent into Afghanistan to meet the needs of commanders in the field.
They have expressed a desire for 3 additional brigade combat teams. The President, the Secretary have made commitments to provide additional resources to Afghanistan in 2009.
A jury of military officers at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, convicted Osama bin Laden's former driver, Salim Hamdan, of supporting terrorism, but cleared him of conspiracy charges. The verdict was reached August 6th after a 10-day trial.
Over the past several weeks, Mr. Hamdan did receive a full and fair trial. He was convicted of material support to terrorism, 5 specifications out of 8 that he was charged with. And as we can see, the military commissions process is moving forward.
The defense had claimed Mr. Hamdan was nothing more than a driver for Osama bin Laden and had no participation in terrorist activities. He was sentenced to 66 months in prison. Also this week in the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Robert Gates took part in a ceremony commemorating the 60th anniversary of the integration of the armed forces.
Our commemoration of the desegregation of the federal workforce and the U.S. military reminds us of how far we have come toward living up to our founding ideals and how far we still have to go.
For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Petty Officer Christina Moore.
The high cost of fuel has forced many Americans to look for ways to become more energy efficient, and the U.S. Army is no different. Right now at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, a major initiative is underway that could forever change the way homes service members and their families live in are built. Air Force Master Sergeant George Maurer reports.
When the price of oil goes up, drivers and their wallets feel the impact. So too does the Defense Department's budget.
A $10 increase in a barrel of oil costs the Department of Defense an extra $1.3 billion a year.
And because of that, Joe Sartiano, a program manager for the Defense Department's Power Surety Task Force, says his group is working on ways to make homes on military installations more energy efficient. 4 different kinds of energy efficient homes for the future are being built right now at Fort Belvoir.
What our intent here is to show what the capabilities, what the possibilities are, and then turn this over to the decision makers of the services and the Department of Defense and say, here's what we were able to do, and maybe this can be incorporated on a much larger scale.
A big part of this initiative involves using a spray foam insulation that's applied inside walls and in the attic.
50% of what we pay for is air loss going in and out of a building. 25% of it is the air moisture coming in. It makes the house feel cooler or warmer than it should. Our product also has the highest efficiency rating there is.
Because of this insulation, their energy bills are going to go down. It's just, you tighten the envelope of a house and the HVAC system doesn't need to work as hard.
It's estimated the installation could lower energy bills by at least 30%. The idea to use the foam started because of the success the military had using it to keep tents cooler in Iraq.
We figured, hey, let's take this to the next step and see if we can't apply what we've learned in an operational scenario and apply it to an installation scenario.
Homes will also contain energy-efficient appliances and windows. Under one plan, homes would even be built with solar panels attached to the roof. All this, say Army officials, is part of the Army's long-term plan to go green.
It's looking to the future, looking out 30 or 40 years to the future to determine what will be the condition of our installations, what will be the condition of the natural resources to which we've been entrusted. And then we'll backcast to today to figure out what are the steps that we need to take, what are the actions that we need to be taking today.
And Mr. Davis says the project at Fort Belvoir is a step in the right direction. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Air Force Master Sergeant George Maurer.
Mr. Sartiano says determining cost efficiency will play a major role in deciding which energy-efficient methods to use. For example, the upfront cost for putting foam insulation in a home's walls and the attic would cost around $5,500. That money would be made back in savings in around 8 years. However, putting in solar panels could create an upfront cost of more than $30,000. Coming up, safeguarding your health. Welcome back to This Week in the Pentagon. As summer slowly winds down, military families are getting ready to send their kids back to school. Part of that preparation includes updating vaccinations. To raise awareness about the importance of getting your shots, this week the Department of Defense kicked off Immunization Awareness Month at the Pentagon Health Clinic. Dr. Michael Kilpatrick, the military's Health System Deputy Director for Force Health Protection, spoke about some of DoD's outreach efforts.
All of the vaccines that DoD uses are FDA approved, and I think that is clearly an important standard that we use in making sure that when the vaccine goes in the arm, that we have a lot of information on safety testing, we have a lot of information on efficacy of the vaccine, and then we just have to inform the patient as to why this is so important to protect their health.
Military clinics and healthcare offices across DoD will conduct special immunization events all month long as children return to school and prepare for the upcoming flu season. One DoD agency actively taking part this month in raising immunization awareness is the Military Vaccine Agency. They're working to let people know what shots they need and when to get them. Marine Sergeant Ashley Bryant reports on their effort.
It's a global effort.
We'll be doing immunization awareness activities with all the military treatment facilities around the world.
The Military Vaccine Agency, or MILVAX, which manages vaccinations for service members and their families, plans to reach the military community through 18 regional locations here at home and others abroad.
We have personnel in Korea, we have Japan, Europe, and Hawaii.
And this will be a familiar sight all month, as MILVAC shines the spotlight on the importance of understanding vaccinations and the importance of receiving them according to the recommended schedule.
A lot of people think, okay, it's just a shot, but it's also giving somebody medicine. We want to be aware of there are people that get allergic reactions, or people have an adverse event. So we want to keep them informed of what's going on, because in the past it was just you just roll up your sleeve and somebody said you got to get a shot. What is that? And you wouldn't know what it was, but now it's very regimented.
The target, service members, their families including newborns, and retirees who, because of their susceptibility, are now advised to get a pneumonia shot during flu season.
It's the pneumococcal vaccine, so that'll help with fighting against that, and also get their influenza shots. And there's also one more. It's the Zostavax, which is for shingles.
Commanders and service members are usually on top of their vaccination requirements thanks to an immunization tracking system which contains all their immunization history.
The days of having the yellow shot card are almost gone. Everybody has an electronic health record and their immunizations to follow it. You can go into the system, but a company commander says, okay, which soldier needs Hep A? He can print it out, know exactly which soldiers need to go get their Hep A shot.
The system also keeps track of other concerns, such as allergies.
They can look and see, all right, what's he allergic to? And if he's allergic to, say, hepatitis A, they would immediately alert the doctor not to give the Hep A and go ahead and provide any other immunizations you might need.
In conjunction with MILVAC, the Vaccine Healthcare Centers Network also monitors immunization safety and concerns like the smallpox and anthrax vaccines.
The anthrax program right now, it's mandatory for going to Korea or anywhere in the CENTCOM regional area, and the same thing for smallpox. However, when the soldier returns from theater, it's voluntary if we want to continue the shot series.
Service members and healthcare providers can also find plenty of information, tools, and resources, including a training course called Immunization University on the MILVAC's website at vaccines.mil. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Marine Sergeant Ashley Bryant.
As with vaccines, medical science can help prevent diseases, and it can also help solve mysteries. From dog tags to DNA, the armed forces have used various techniques to solve mysteries of missing service members from before the Civil War. That evidence is now preserved at the National Museum of Health and Medicine in a new exhibit called Resolved: Advances in Forensic Identification of U.S. War Dead.
All right, guys, I'm going to make one more run and I got to get out of here.
But instead, there's a crash, an investigation. Pieces of the puzzle are gathered from the field. It's then that forensic scientists begin to put the story together. It's work that first began essentially during the Civil War, when material evidence, like some sort of tag, was just about all they had to go on.
The individual service member had to go get them on their own. They had to pay $1. Those that didn't buy a medallion would do things like pen their name on a piece of paper, or they would carry their letters with them.
By the early 1900s, the services began collecting fingerprints, less to identify those killed at war, and more to catch service members filing false pension claims. Now the FBI routinely collects prints from every service member.
You can have the best science in the world to look at the postmortem, from the postmortem, the body itself, but unless you have the antemortem data, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to make an identification.
Dental charts became important points of data collection in World War I, but a certain dentist by the name of Paul Revere became one of the first to make a dental ID when during an exhumation he recognized his own work.
Paul Revere fashioned a dental bridge for Major General Joseph Warren. He made out of animal teeth and copper wire. Later on, his family and friends wanted his body exhumed to give him a proper individual burial to be identified. Paul Revere went along with them. When they opened up the grave and they were looking through the bodies, he says, "That must be him." that's the dental work that I did.
After World War II, the human skeleton most often provided identity clues in a mass effort to return war dead from overseas. The length of a femur can indicate stature. A skull can reveal race. Sometime during the Korean War, the concept of concurrent return became policy. That is, rather than wait until combat operations had ceased before collecting remains, bodies were brought home as close to the time of death as possible. It wasn't until the late 80s that medical examiners were organized into an umbrella office for pathology, radiology, and toxicology labs. In Dover, Delaware, the ME can use a scanner to conduct a virtual autopsy.
That additional set of data that allows them to be more directed in their autopsy to help figure out in a more efficient manner the cause and manner of death.
The medical examiner has also incorporated the use of mitochondrial, then nuclear DNA to make positive identifications. Again, no matter how good the science, without ante-mortem material, there's nothing to match what's found in the field. So each service member now has DNA information on file. The science has come a long way, but the mission remains to bring every American home. This next story is truly an unusual DNA success story. It's also a love story. In 1965, Air Force Colonel Charles Scharf was shot down in North Vietnam. His remains were recovered but never positively identified until 41 years later. We recently spoke with Colonel Scharf's widow, who today is in her 70s. Air Force Master Sergeant George Maurer has her story.
I liked his gentleness, the way he looked, the way he walked, the way he talked, and always was holding my hand like he was protecting me.
Chuck and Patricia Scharf married when she was 18 years old. 12 years later, he went to Vietnam.
And then he said, chances are I may get shot down. And I looked at him as if to say, no, he said, I just want you to be prepared. I would get 3 letters, maybe 2 letters a day, and then for about a week I wouldn't get any because of the situation there. Just wait until I come home.
Days before he was due to return, Colonel Scharf's F-4 Phantom II was shot down over North Vietnam. It would be more than a decade before his designation could be changed from missing in action to killed.
They found my husband's bridge. They found the scapulars. They found his wallet, parts of a checkbook. They found his ID tags. They brought back bone fragments.
There was a ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, but DNA testing had failed to prove Scharf's identity. Then came a call from JPAC in Honolulu. They wanted to know if she had anything of the colonel's that she hadn't mentioned before.
And I said, the only thing I have left is the love letters. And it was a pause on the telephone saying, love letters? And I said, I have them in a shoebox wrapped in plastic.
An old habit, saving letters, combined with another. Miss Scharf always opens her letters from the side. The saliva still on the envelopes contained enough DNA to make a positive ID.
It was almost as if she knew, Patricia knew, that she had to keep those letters.
You can't explain the feeling that came out of my soul.
A second funeral and a final resting place.
I am glad I have him at the cemetery, and it's so beautiful out there. It's not a jungle. It's not the wet mud. I tell him what's going on. I'll say, babe, you just don't know what's going on here. But we've got you back, and that's it. Yeah. And it makes me happy.
For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Air Force Master Sergeant George Maurer.
The Scharf case is featured as part of the Recovered exhibit at the National Museum of Health and Medicine. The museum is located on the campus of Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Still ahead, safety on the water. Welcome back to This Week in the Pentagon, and happy birthday to the U.S. Coast Guard. August 4th marked the 218th year the Coast Guard has been around. To mark the occasion, the service commissioned its first national security cutter and new flagship, the Coast Guard Cutter Berthoff, at the ship's new home on Coast Guard Island in Alameda, California.
Captain, the flag of the Commandant of the Coast Guard is flying over Coast Guard Cutter Berthoff.
Very well. I'm proud to be able to be here to witness the latest addition to the fleet, but to recognize that while the vessel is new, the spirit and the capability of those who will man this vessel are as old as the traditions of the Coast Guard itself, going back 218 years.
The event is just one that took place around the country, marking the Coast Guard's birthday. The Coast Guard was created in 1790 by then Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. The Defense Department's 101 Critical Days of Summer is a program meant to raise awareness about the increase in fatalities among service members between Memorial and Labor Day. Traditionally, when summer rolls around, more time is spent outdoors and DoD sees more off-duty deaths. But many of these are preventable, especially out on the water. Coast Guard Petty Officer Adam Eggers shows us how to stay safe and how to be prepared should something go wrong.
One of the Coast Guard's core missions is ensuring safety on the water. During the summer months, that means recreational boating. Coast Guard auxiliary members, the service's volunteer force, conduct vessel safety checks. These examinations are free of charge, and if any violations are found, no fines will be issued.
If we find a discrepancy, it's between the inspector and the boat owner, and they have an opportunity to correct it.
On this morning, auxiliaries are conducting vessel safety checks at the Fort Belvoir Marina in Virginia. These boaters passed their inspection and received a sticker signifying they're in compliance. But if you don't have an examination, ask yourself, will you be ready the next time you hear this?
Been boarded by the Coast Guard lately?
Although the Coast Guard can issue fines, they aren't the main goal of the boardings. We got underway with the crew from Station Curtis Bay, Maryland, to see firsthand what a boarding entails.
Well, first, when we come alongside, we want to make sure that they understand why we're there and make sure that the vessel is safe and seaworthy. After that, we pretty much just go right into the boarding, checking all their safety equipment, making sure they have all the required safety gear.
The entire point of conducting these vessel safety checks is to ensure that if an emergency does arise on the water, that recreational boaters have the proper safety gear on board to survive. Well, something did happen tonight. We're actually on our way now to search for 2 people from a capsized boat.
After searching the area where the vessel was spotted, no signs of a boat or victims were found. And although the crew's response time was less than 30 minutes, sometimes help can't arrive that quickly. Having all the required safety gear on board can drastically increase a boater's chances of survival. That's why the crew takes every opportunity to correct any problem.
Not necessarily a violation not having the stuff on board, it's not having it in the right proper place. For instance, the Type 4 throwable life ring or throwable cushion, it's not on deck, readily accessible. Most people have it inside the cabin and not where they can actually get to it.
That role as a boating educator takes high priority for Coast Guard crews.
Yeah, that's definitely our main goal, is to educate the boater. And a lot of them have questions. A lot of people just have it. They bought it at the store and keep it on board the boat. A lot of them, they don't understand what the real purpose of it is.
1 Sector Baltimore, request you to respond.
Whether you're out fishing, hunting, or just to have a good time, remember, the water doesn't care how strong you think you are, or how well you think you can swim, or even what military uniform you put on. It treats every victim equally. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Coast Guard Petty Officer Adam Eggers.
Some items required by federal law are life jackets, a throwable life ring, and the boat's registration. Some of these requirements do change depending on the size of your boat. For a complete list, visit uscgboating.org. There, you can also request a vessel safety check and sign up for a boating safety course. They were called Thud, Lead Sled, and Super Hog by Air Force pilots and ground crews. The rugged F-105 Thunder Chief was a workhorse fighter bomber during the Vietnam War, flying more than 20,000 missions. Now a veteran of that war is working to preserve a common history he shares with one of the big jets. 40 years ago, the F-105 Thunder Chief roared from bases in Thailand bound for targets over North and South Vietnam. It was dangerous duty for Thunder Chief crews, and the toll was high. More than 300 F-105s were down by enemy fire. More than 190 pilots were killed in action.
Once the airplane got going, it was almost impossible to break it. Of course, the enemy could do that for us.
John Schatz remembers well the challenge of making the Thunder Chief ready for those risky missions.
We have 20 aircraft assigned to the outfit.
From June 1966 till June 1967, Captain John Schatz was stationed at Korat Royal Thai Air Force Base as maintenance officer with the 421st Tactical Fighter Squadron. His job, to keep 14 F-105s combat ready.
So about 2 hours would elapse from the time that it landed until the time it was ready to go again. And in some cases less if there was an emergency, target, something like that. But normally 2 flights a day, and in some cases 3.
John's latest challenge, to mark the history of that dangerous mission with this Thunder Chief, now on display at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum near Washington, D.C. John worked here restoring aircraft, and last year he led an 8-month effort to restore this F-105 back to its Vietnam-era look.
Well, this thing fought us all the way, reassembling it. From the wings, trying to get that back into shape, very peculiar system. We're now working with here with all of the nice equipment that the Air Force and the factory had back in the beginnings.
But it was more than another preservation project. John was also saving a piece of his own history. Both he and this Thunder Chief were based at Korat.
It's kind of like going to visit an old friend. It was kind of an honor, really, to be able to resurrect this thing and, bring it back. I think it's fitting we're both in museums.
For John Schatz and this Thunder Chief, it's mission accomplished once again, with the story of F-105s in Vietnam preserved for future generations. That's our show this week. We want to thank everyone involved for their contributions. Please be sure to tune in and join us again next week as we examine some of the top news stories surrounding the Department of Defense. I'm Sergeant Brian Buckwalter. Thanks for watching. With more than a dozen military athletes in Beijing this week to compete in the Summer Olympic Games, we leave with these words of encouragement from Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Michael Mullen.
I see so many spectacular young people that are members of our military. So to have a dozen of them participating at the highest level in what are recognized as the global games, the Olympics, it's got to be a peak for them in their career, and certainly we're very proud of them. I wish them the best of luck, and I know they'll do well, and they'll represent not just our military, but they'll represent our country exceptionally well.